Well, it's starting time, so good morning. So we've been in Luke 22, and I have condensed my notes so that we can get into Luke 23. So we're going to do that this morning, but let me do my questions that I like to ask. In Genesis 5, you get a list of the descendants of Noah. Who had the shortest lifespan, and why? Anybody remember? Once you get it, you'll go, oh, I knew that. Shortest lifespan of the descendants of Noah. Well, he wasn't a descendant of Noah. I'm talking about the descendants of Noah. Well, that can't be right, can it? Let's find out. It's got to be the descendants of Adam. I'm definitely misspeaking. Let's go back and have a look. Descendants of Noah in Genesis. No, I am. It is right. It's descendants too. No, so it's descendants of Adam. So here's my question again, corrected. The descendants of Noah, no, Adam, who had the shortest lifespan and why? Sheesh. Still early. Nope. Yeah, Abel died. Let's excuse Abel from the... Who else? All right, I'm trying to get to Enoch because he was taken. Come on, guys. Oh, that was a dud question. Abel would be correct, whoever said that back there and yelled it at me. I was trying to get to Enoch. Okay. Here's an easier one then, maybe. Name 3 miracles of Elijah. Okay. Fire from heaven, yeah. What else? Okay, yeah, there was the oil and flour. Say again? He made the rain stop. There's 3, yeah. Here's the list. The drought, the never-ending flour and oil, raising the widow's son, calling down fire in 1 Kings 18, and calling down fire again in 2 Kings chapter 2. Who were Jesus' first 3 disciples? I have Andrew, John, and Simon, or Peter. I have Andrew, John, and Peter. But since my first question is a dud, now I'm second guessing myself. So. All right, how about this one? What, in Revelation 6, were the 4 colors of horses that came out of the scroll? Yep. And white, yeah. Really interesting about the pale horse, it actually calls the color of the horse Clorox, which is like a yellowy green color, right? Where we get our bleach color from. You know, that kind of toxic yellow color? That's what that looks like. So interesting. Okay, let's do one more. What relation was Mordecai to Esther? Are you sure? Who said cousin? 50 points. It is cousin. It is cousin. You'll see that in Esther chapter 2. We have often said, Uncle, I don't know how that stuck. It's quite clearly cousin. Yeah. So Esther chapter 2. And you can find that there. Somebody find that for me. And I'm going to give you one more hard one. See if you can do it. What were the Jewish names of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Anybody know? Yeah. Hananiah, Mishael, and starts with an A. Azariah. Very good. I'm giving you 66 points for that. That was good. All right. Okay, good. Get that out of the way. I like to do those. Let's jump right back in then to Luke chapter 22. Get the brain cells moving. Clearly mine too. So Luke 22, we're going to finish this chapter, Lord willing. So, say again? Did you say this year? Yeah, we're hoping. It's hard, I'm telling you. So in Luke 22, you have really the beginning of the end for Jesus' ministry and his life. And we have seen him having the Passover in chapter 22 and verse 7 and following. Their kind of contest about who's the greatest. It's not going to be me that denies you, Lord. I'm actually the greatest in the kingdom. So you have this back and forth. Peter actually brings that to its head and he says, actually, I would even die for you. And Peter is told by Jesus what? It won't be morning until what happens? Yeah, you're going to deny me 3 times. Okay? And then we get to this verse 35, that the scripture must be fulfilled. And he's talking about sending them out with no money bag. And that when they went in this limited commission, everything was taken care of for them. They were met and they had their needs supplied. They were fed. They did miracles. They came back again. And everything went peachy. And Jesus says, but now, verse 36, let the one who has a money bag take it, likewise a knapsack, and let the one who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. And we talked about how Jesus is preparing them for a different experience this time. When the Great Commission would roll out, they were going to go out and meet hostility rather than the peace and easier process that they had in their kind of apprenticeship, if you will. Okay? That takes us to 39, where Jesus heads out from the upper room where they were having their Lord's Supper, their final supper, should I say. And they head out across the Kidron Valley up into the Mount of Olives. And there, Jesus prays, and he makes his 3 appeals to God that if there was some other means of getting done the whole scheme of redemption, please, now would be the time to let me know. And so you see this contest between Jesus' human will and his desire to not die what he knows is going to be a horrible death, and the Lord, the Father's will, that was going to help him carry him through this process. So Jesus knew from early on what his death was going to look like, because he started telling the apostles, didn't he? He said the Son of Man is going to be handed over to lawless men, and he's going to be killed. And so Jesus already knew what was happening. He was in control of that. But as anybody would, even if you were in control but submitting to it, you would still want that to not happen if you could. And so that's what you see in the garden. Nevertheless, your will, not mine. Okay, and then he has this comment to the disciples. Rise, verse 46, and pray that you may not enter into temptation. Knowing what's going to happen to Peter in just the next few hours from here, what do you think Jesus is trying to get them to recognize? So Jesus knows that he's about to die. He's about to be taken and crucified. They're about to lose their leader, the disciples. What's he trying to get them to do? Okay, they need the encouragement. Yeah, so there's a great analogy there. They were physically sleeping, but they were also spiritually sleeping in some regards. And you see that with Peter here in just a minute. He wasn't prepared because when Jesus was about to go do something challenging, what you always find? Yeah, so Jesus understood very clearly the connection between strength, encouragement, and ability to get things done and prayer. And he was trying to get his disciples to see the value of that too. You need to spend time in prayer that you may not enter into temptation, is what he tells them. I wonder, do we pray like that? Do we think like that? Do we take Jesus' advice here that there is strength and protection in prayer? I think that we should give that deep consideration with all of the temptations and challenges that are in our lives. That if your prayer life is not, as Paul says, constant, it might not be enough. So I think we can all do better in that regard, can't we? Yeah, I think we can. And praying for each other. I was on the phone last night with a friend of mine. Spent the last 10 to me. I don't know. When I haven't prompted that, and I just get on the phone with a friend randomly, and he tells to me and encouraging. And is somebody that will get down on their knees or in his case, walk and pray. And we should do that. All right, so then, and you see there Judas, and he kisses Jesus. Close friends, it was a kiss on the cheek, kind of like the French do. It's kind of an informal but close connection. This turned it into something evil, and so he does. The whole altercation between Peter and the servant of the high priest, and again, I kind of think that he wasn't aiming for the ear. I think he was trying to end the thing. And Jesus says, nope, that's not what we're doing. We'll have something else going on. And then I think it's in John, it might be Matthew, but I think it's in John where Jesus says, look, if I wanted that, I could call down a whole legion of angels. Your little toothpick, I don't need it. I could have had that arrangement if I wanted it, but I just passed through that temptation. That's what I was praying for on the mountain. I have the power to stop this, but I am submitting to the will of God. And so Peter is kind of baffled by this, and I actually think that sets the stage well for what happens next. Think about from Peter's perspective. He has gone from, oh, there's somebody that's willing to betray Jesus among us. I know that's not me. So much so that I'm resolved even to die. And then Jesus says, actually, you'll deny me before the morning. So now you have a jarred and confused Peter who is all the more adamant to not let that happen. So when the opportunity, even inside an hour or two from that statement takes place, Peter says, no, I'm not going to let that happen. And so he starts swinging. And then Jesus says to him, stop, Peter, that's not what I want. And now Peter's confused again. Do you want me to deny you? Do you want me to not deny you? I don't understand. And so you have this spicy, fiery Peter who is both confused, convicted, and now just concerned that he doesn't seem to know what to do for Jesus. And I think that sets us up now then for verse 54, where their king, Peter was the one who recognized Jesus. Who do you say that I am? Remember Jesus asked? And what did Peter say? I recognize your divinity, and I recognize that you're the one who has been sent into the world to save us. That's what the Christ means, the Messiah. So Peter recognized Jesus, and he's convicted. He's wanting to protect him, and this is their king. The Christ would be the king. That was the connection in the Jewish mind. And so for Jesus to walk down the hill with this mob and go with them willingly has got to be blowing Peter's mind. Why is Jesus letting him do this? I have seen him turn water into wine. I've seen him raise people from the dead. Why is he letting this happen? Yeah, there's a very human element here with Peter. Let's read 54 of Luke 22. When they seized him, that's Jesus, they led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house, and Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, this man also was with him. But he denied it, saying, woman, I do not know him. And a little later someone else saw him and said, you are also one of them. But Peter said, man, I'm not. 59, and after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, certainly this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean. Let me ask you how he could have known that. How could somebody have known he was a Galilean? I think it was an accent thing, yeah. Like in the UK, you can always spot, well, anywhere in the world, you can always spot somebody from Scotland as soon as they open their mouth. All they have to do is start talking, and as soon as you hear that Scottish accent, you can pinpoint exactly where they came from. And that is true. Amy, do you remember in preaching school when Scott Tomini came? I was in preaching school, and we had a guy from one of the congregations in Scotland, and he was just walking through the building. I said, Scott, what are you doing? So me and him started talking. Nobody else could understand a word. He was speaking English, Scottish English, and it was just a blur of words and syllables. So that must have been, I think, what allowed this guy to say, this is a Galilean, because you didn't wear a little badge that said, hello, my name's Galilean, right? It had to have been speech. So they must have been, conversing back and forth, and Peter said something that just caught. You know what people say to me here a lot? They'll say, I can pick out your Irish accent just in a few words here and there. Sometimes I'll say a certain thing, like aluminium, which is the correct way of saying things. And people will say, oh, that's the British way of saying things. All right, so I think that's what's going on here. So this man, certainly, verse 59, is this man was also with him, for he too is a Galilean. Peter said, man, I do not know what you're talking about. And immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. A couple of things here. The high priest, kind of like the president of the United States, maintained the title high priest for the rest of his life. So you have 2 high priests at the time of Jesus. Do you remember who they are? Okay. Annas and Caiaphas. I think that this is probably Caiaphas, because Annas was removed, if memory serves me. I think by Pilate, or one of the Roman proconsuls had removed Annas because they didn't like what he was doing, so they put his son-in-law in place, Caiaphas. But that meant that you had 2 men who the Jews reckoned as the high priest, because the high priest essentially was to run until he was 65 or until he died. And so I think when it just says the high priest's house, we're talking about Caiaphas. And
Matthew says it's Caiaphas.
okay, Matthew 26?
Yep.
Okay. So that makes good sense. So that's the house of Caiaphas. And this was a palace. It would have been a big complex. Trying to imagine something like the governor's house in Florida or something. It would be a big complex. And I think the courtyard was kind of the outer area where the public could be, but it was actually the property of the high priest. And 26, I think it's 26 in verse 3. Let's get over there. Matthew 26 in verse 3. Just, I think, lays that out for us. Chief priests and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas. Now that is before the
Verse 57.
you got it there?
Those who seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and elders.
Excellent. So there we go. That puts us in Caiaphas' house. All right, good. So the courtyard then was this kind of outside area, and clearly they could have, whether it was the rabble that had followed or the mob, or when they saw Jesus coming in with the torches and everything, people started gathering. This was still either very late at night or early in the morning. So this puts us in a strange place to have people just out and around in the yard. I think this must have been people from the house or the surrounding area that decided they were going to light a fire here and to watch what was happening. Clearly, wherever Jesus was in this whole arrangement, you'll see in a minute that they were beating him and spitting on him. Clearly that Peter could see, maybe there was a colonnaded section far enough away that you could see from a distance but not be spotted. Because Jesus was able to turn back and see Peter. So what exactly all this looked like, it still shows Peter's determination to be close to his Lord and to see how things go. You don't have any mention in Luke that the other disciples were around. I think John shows us that they might have been, maybe John, but here you definitely have Peter at least willing to follow Jesus as he had said he would. I don't know why Peter spoke at all, unless when he was first spotted, he just had to say, look, it's not me, I don't know what you're talking about. But clearly he's conversing enough that this accent of his catches him out. I think what he has just experienced with being sorrowful because of what's happening, and he's sorrowful unto sleep, you see that in the garden, and then the whole interchange with Judas, so the adrenaline kicks in, he gets ready to kill a man, and then Peter's stopped. I think Peter's really jarred and confused, and I think, again, had he been praying that he wouldn't enter into temptation, things might have looked a little differently for him. So his denial, the man, I do not know him, is very similar to what the Jews said when somebody was excommunicated from the synagogue. They say, we don't know you. Which is exactly what Jesus, the same terminology Jesus uses, isn't it? About those who enter in death not known by God. Doesn't he say, I don't know you, depart from me? That's the same language used when the Jews excommunicated somebody. And Peter's using very strong language here then to say, I have no idea who this person is. It's about the strongest way in Aramaic that you could put that. So, all right, what are your thoughts on this? Because I want to move on into 23. Anything that stands out to you? That's good. Indeed. What happened? Yes. On where, do you love me more than these? Yes, I do. 3 times he undoes the 3 denials. So that's useful from Mike there. Thank you. Bitterly. And wept bitterly. A tough moment for Peter. I really, my thinking with Peter, humanity of him, who is eager to do what's right, often missteps. Jesus is constantly correcting him, but he still wants to get it right. I feel for Peter, and you just see the very human element in him, don't you? All right, let's move into 63 then. Now, this is all still happening in this courtyard area. The men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him as they beat him, as they blindfolded him and kept asking him, prophesy, who is it that struck you? And they said many other things against him, blaspheming him. Okay? I think that Jesus was either being moved during this process, because there was an hour passed where Peter was able to converse. And so either Jesus was being mocked while Caiaphas and Annas are talking or trying to gather up these kind of false witnesses. And so Jesus is being held. I don't know if these were Roman soldiers. I don't think that's the case. Probably temple guard. I think it's probably the temple guard that's holding him, or maybe Idumeans. So Herod had his own group of soldiers that kind of protected his complex in his area. But it's probably the case it was the temple guards that held him and treating him with a great deal of contempt. Luke says that they blasphemed him. Any thoughts on this section? Mm-hmm. The Greek word's actually blaspheme. It actually says blaspheme, which would have been true, saying these things to him. All right, then, 66. When day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes. Now, the ESV translates the word synagogue as assembly. You probably have the word synagogue, or the Sanhedrin is actually what the Greek says. So this was the 70 men of the kind of ruling class. And so this council was the Sanhedrin. So when day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council. That's the word council there. And they said, if you are the Christ, tell us. But he said to them, if I tell you, you will not believe. And if I ask you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God. So they all said, are you the Son of God then? And he said to them, you say that I am. Then they said to him, what further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips. There's a couple of things in here just to pull out for clarity's sake. When he says, if I tell you, they say, hey, tell us plainly. If Jesus was to say, yes, I am the Christ, he says to them, you wouldn't believe me. How many interactions has he had, and especially in the Gospel of John, you see very clearly that Jesus says things that only the Christ or even God could say. You know, when he says, before Abraham was, ego I me, I am, it was a statement of divinity. And that's why they picked up the stones and they were ready to kill him. They recognized what Jesus was saying about himself. And so Jesus says, look, I've already done this. I've already said this to you many times. And so if I told you plainly, you wouldn't even believe me. All you want to do is try to kill me. You're trying to get me to say that I'm the king of the Jews, so then you have something to give to Pilate who can put me to death. So if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. And if I were to ask you questions that prove my divinity or my kingship, what are you going to say? You won't answer me. I'm stuck. Jesus says this whole thing's a farce, and you know it is. If I ask, you will not answer. So then he gives them this. Verse 69. From now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God. And actually, let me see if I can find it. I think it's Matthew 26. Okay, let's go back over to Matthew. Adds one more piece to this. In 57, let's start in 57. Matthew 26, 57. Then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and elders had gathered. And Peter was following at a distance and as far the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus that they might put him to death. So that's the purpose here. That's why they had Judas betray him. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last, two came forward, saying, this man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days. And the high priest stood up and said, have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? But Jesus remained silent, and the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God. I am compelling you to answer as the high priest. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, you have said so, but I tell you from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power. And look, this is the bit that's added. And coming on the clouds of heaven. Now that bit is important. In just a minute I'll show you why. The high priest tore his robes and said, he has utterly blasphemed. What further witness do you need? And you have now heard him blaspheme. What is your judgment? And they said, he deserves death. They spat in his face, struck him. Some slapped him, saying, prophesy to us. Tell us if you are the Christ. Who struck you? Shocking. Okay, so you get this extra bit here that you will see the Son of Man seated in the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds. Does anybody know where that comes from? Yeah, that's Daniel chapter 7. And Daniel sees this vision of the throne of God, and God is sitting there, and up on the clouds comes one like a son of man, and up he comes and receives a kingdom and glory and power, and it's a kingdom that will never be destroyed. And this reference, that terminology there, cannot be missed. There's only one place there where you get this. And they said, oh, is that you? Are you saying that's you? And then, so that's verse 70. Are you the Son of God then? And he said to them, you say that I am, verse 70. What translations do you have there? I have, you say that I am. What do you have? Okay, you rightly say that I am. What else? Yes, I am. Okay. Probably the Greek gives you something like, as you say it, and the implication is, as you have said, so it is. It kind of translates as, you have said it, or as you say. But what Jesus is essentially saying is, that's what you think, that's what you've said, as you say it, it's true. It's essentially what way it kind of boils down. That's why they're able to turn around and say, what further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips. So when you read it in English here, you say that I am is not an admission of guilt. That would be me saying, you're saying it, but the Greek is really closer to, as you have said, so it is, which is an admission, much closer to an admission. And so they said, look, we've heard it from his own lips, he's admitted to it, and now we're ready to go. The crucifixion is on. All right, so before I get some other things in here, what are your thoughts on this last section? Anything standing out? This is Daniel 7:13. I have it in my notes here. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him, and was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom is one that shall not be destroyed. This was absolutely messianic, and it was absolutely admission both of being the Son of God and a king. He is his dominion, his king, and his kingdom. So for Jesus to have used this terminology, is essentially him saying, look, you wanted me to tell you I'm the Christ, here it is. I am the one that Daniel talked about. Okay. All right then. Anything else before we go in to, yes? Yeah. Yeah, so in the book of Daniel, this Son of Man was a clear depiction of God. That's what they recognized. They said, so are you the Son of God? They knew that this Son of Man imagery was actually the Son of God. And they rightly figured that. And so he comes back and says, yeah, the two are the same, and that's what the case is. I am both. So interestingly also is the term that God uses for Ezekiel almost the whole way through the book of Ezekiel. He calls him the Son of Man, kind of magnifying the fact that he's a child of Adam. He's a human, but he has these divine experiences. Whereas Jesus' most common term for himself was the Son of Man. He used that a lot about himself. The Son of Man will be taken as it is written about him. You know, he says a lot of these things. But they understood that this Son of Man, Daniel chapter 7, was the Son of God. And they said, is this true? And he says, yeah, essentially. Anything else? Let's read the section with Jesus before Pilate, and we might be able to get a few comments made. This is 23. By the end of this chapter, Jesus will be in the tomb. All right? The whole company of them rose and brought him before Pilate. Why? You have the whole Sanhedrin take him to Pilate. Why? Say again? Okay. I think even stronger than that, they had gotten to the point where they could do no more themselves. The Jews were not allowed to kill anybody. So let's get John 18. Let me get over to John. Well, the whole thing was a kangaroo court, but they didn't want to get themselves in trouble with Rome by killing a man without permission. But they were pretty confident, and that's part of what you see here. By claiming Jesus as the king, there's no king but Caesar. So if you can say, here's a man who's claiming to be king, it's seditious, and now we have reason to take him to Pilate. So it was smart on their point to get that done. This. Well, the only way that you could kill somebody in Jerusalem was with the Romans' authority. And now Jesus was from Galilee, and so Pilate recognizes that that's actually Herod's jurisdiction. So we'll see that in just a minute. In John 18:32, maybe 31, Pilate said to them, "Take him yourself and judge him by your own law." But the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." And then 19 in verse 10, Pilate says as much to Jesus. Let me see if I can find that. Pilate said to him, Jesus, "Will you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you or authority to crucify you?" All right, so Pilate is the guy to get the job done that the Jews want. And so you see that. So they take him to Pilate, back to Luke 23. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man misleading our nation, forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king." You see that second little note there is important to the Romans. You can't have another king in Jerusalem if he's not Caesar. Right? And you had vassal kings, like Herod was a king, but under the authority of Herod, or Caesar. So they give three things here to Pilate. He's messing up the Pax Romana, that's the Roman peace that we maintain, and he's stopping us from paying taxes, and he's saying that he's actually the king. So if you want to get the Roman officials angry, this is a pretty fast way of getting it done, right? What do you got, Derek?
Yeah, I think that this emphasizes why they came to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Because they are wanting Pilate to see that it's the easiest path for him to put this guy to death because we all want it. You know, it's going to be a bigger deal if you just let this go. He's trying to show them that they're trying to show Pilate that basically this is a problem for us. They bring a big crowd of people to make their case more, I guess, important.
Yeah.
More heard.
Yeah, it puts a rush and pressure on things, doesn't it? When you have a mob out there saying, kill him, kill him. So they do that well. You have to give them credit for being intelligent in these ways. They were cunning men, and indeed they were. It did. The pressure was on. Yes. I think it's Matthew's account where they say, look, if you don't crucify him, you're no king of Caesar's, no friend of Caesar's. And no Roman proconsul wants to hear that because Caesar was a pretty volatile guy. Always, all of them were. And you didn't want that spreading about you. So, okay. So we found this man misleading our nation, bidding us to give, not to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. Verse 3, Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? And he answered them, you have said so. There's that terminology again, as you say. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, I find no guilt in this man. But they were urgent, that's to Derek's point there, they were urgent, saying he stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea from Galilee even to this place. Now when Pilate heard that he asked whether this man was a Galilean. When he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod. And we will pick up with Herod next week, Lord willing. Anything else before we close? Okay.